despise crime and they despise violence. Even now, after months of unending propaganda, the average person has a far higher opinion of the police than of politicians, and for good reason. Voters have started to blame Joe Biden for the chaos they see outside. Suddenly, that's clear in the polls, and Democratic leaders are very worried about it. Just as during the Iraq War, our political class promoted violence to achieve regime change. Then they lost control of their proxies and destroyed an entire country. Now they're frantically trying to distance themselves from the terror they created. Sound familiar? They have no moral regrets about any of it. They're just worried that getting blame might cost them power, so they're working to shirk that blame. Today, Joe Biden's handlers flew him to Pennsylvania so he could, quote, denounce violence. They gave him a short speech to read. They allowed no questions afterward. Biden mouthed the words they had written. He blamed Trump voters for everything, all the violence, all the rioting, presumably for all the defaced and destroyed statues, too. They did it. It must have been Trump supporters who spray-painted Kill Whitey on the pedestal of the Francis Scott Key Monument in San Francisco. Of course it was. Right-wingers, always trying to erase American history. Biden's 12 minutes today in Pennsylvania may have been the most thoroughly dishonest speech ever given by an American presidential candidate. Virtually every word of it was the opposite of the truth. It was literally beyond belief. But there was at least one honest line in that speech. We want to highlight it for you, because that line reveals what all of this is really about. Here it is.
His failure to call on his own supporters to stop acting as an armed militia in this country shows how weak he is. Does anyone believe there'll be less violence in America if Donald Trump is reelected?
Oh, think there'll be less violence if he's reelected? Got it? It's a nice country you have here. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to it. That's not an observation, obviously. It's a threat. And it wasn't a mistake either. It's not a line he just blurted out. That line was in Biden's prepared remarks. His campaign tweeted it out later. They were proud of it. This is the official message of the Biden campaign. If you dare re-elect Donald Trump, prepare for more rioting. You think Biden voters are dangerous now? Wait till you see them in Trump's second term. Now, we'd love to pretend that's another lie from the speech, but it's not a lie. It's likely true. And Biden was right about it. Pretty much everyone understands that it is true. But still, what a thing to say out loud. What country is this? Vote for me or my people will keep blocking traffic and setting fires and hurting people? Yes, that's exactly what they're saying. They'll never put it quite that way, of course, but the threat of violence is implied in everything they do. It's starting to become clear why the people who run the Democratic Party, people who, by the way, are not at all stupid, realized very early that Joe Biden was a perfect presidential candidate. The rest of us were mocking him for being senile, but they knew they had the right guy. Biden can say things like what you just heard without scaring you. That's a rare talent. Biden doesn't seem like an extremist because personally he is not an extremist. Ask anyone who knows Joe Biden. Biden is a corporate lobbyist who represented a tiny state in the Senate for 40 years. Joe Biden doesn't want a revolution. He just wants to live in a big house and have strangers love him. At this point, Biden is too slow to be radical anyway. The people who control Joe Biden understand this perfectly well. And today they had him break the fourth wall and say it out loud. Watch.
Ask yourself, do I look like a radical socialist with a soft spot for rioters? Really?
Do I look like a radical socialist? No. You look like a glad-handing shill for the credit card companies because that's exactly who you are, and that's why you're such an effective front man. But the people behind you are radical as hell, and we are not guessing about that. Biden's running mate, President-in-waiting Kamala Harris, openly solicited donations for rioters in Minneapolis. Quote, if you're able to, Harris tweeted in June, chip in now to the Minnesota Freedom Fund to help post bail for those protesting on the ground in Minnesota. Amazingly, that tweet is still up. At least 13 members of Joe Biden's staff sent money to the rioters in Minneapolis. So what did the Minnesota Freedom Fund do with the cash they got? Well, they freed a person who was being held for trying to kill the cops, murder them. They also bailed out an accused murderer and a twice-convicted rapist, among many others. Kamala Harris has never apologized for doing this. She's never repudiated the Minnesota Freedom Fund. Biden, of course, didn't mention it in his speech today, but why would he mention it? He's not against it. He officially supports the idea behind it. The Biden campaign has called bail, quote, a modern-day debtor's prison. Joe Biden is pledging, if elected, to end cash bail nationally in every state. What would that look like? What would happen if Joe Biden did that? Well, we know the answer. We don't have to guess because Democrats have already eliminated cash bail in New York City. And what happened? You know what happened. Criminals immediately flooded the streets. Hundreds of thousands of residents fled the city. Not right-wingers, by the way. Joe Biden voters. They left. They had to because violence surged out of control. Over the weekend, one savage tried to rape a 25-year-old woman on a subway platform at 11 in the morning in public view. You may have seen it on video. It happened on the Upper East Side, one of the prettiest neighborhoods in the country, a beautiful, formerly safe neighborhood. But it's not just New York. Democrat-controlled cities all over the country look like this now. There's no denying it or its effects. Spend an hour on Zillow and look at real estate prices. People are literally running away from cities run by Democrats, and they're going to places that aren't. That's not a guess. It's not a talking point. It's true. Yet, according to the Biden campaign, this has nothing to do with the Democratic Party. No, it's all Donald Trump's fault. Watch.
He's been leading. It's exactly the opposite of what we've been seeing from Trump, who's been trying to incite violence this entire summer.
Just wait a second. Well, I'll get to violence in a second. No, I'm thinking in real time. The president is inciting violence?
Absolutely. He has. He has encouraged his supporters to go out, to be aggressive.
Trump is inciting violence. Oh, right. He's the one screaming at you in the car on the way home and spray painting the F word on federal buildings and smashing windows and torching Wendy's. Those are all Trump voters. This is lunacy. It's totally false. There are lots of things you could blame Trump for sure. That's not one of them. So will a single person believe these lies? Well, the thoroughly beta mayor of Portland, Ted Wheeler, is hoping they will. Wheeler is blaming federal authorities for the state of permanent rioting in his city. It's gone on all summer. We've covered it here virtually every night. People are now being shot in Portland. Ted Wheeler wants you to know that's Trump's fault, too.
Your campaign of fear is as anti-democratic as anything you've done to create hate and vitriol in our beautiful country. You've tried to divide us more than any other figure in modern history. And now you want me to stop the violence that you helped create.
This guy. So many like this. What a total mediocrity. In his defense, he probably imagined when he was elected mayor of Portland that it would be all upside. He'd never have hard decisions to make. He'd never have to keep chaos under control. But he does, and he's failed. And now he's blaming others. Portland is as liberal a city as we have in this country. Democrats run everything in Portland. Donald Trump got 17% of the vote in the entire county in the last election. Yet somehow, Ted Wheeler wants you to know, Trump is controlling the political climate in Portland, Oregon. As always, the opposite is true. Trump supporters are, in fact, no longer allowed in the city of Portland. On Saturday, one of them, a member of the group Patriot Prayer, was murdered in downtown Portland, apparently for supporting Donald Trump. The governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, promptly blamed the dead man, blamed the dead man for his own murder. Patriot Prayer was in town, Brown declared, quote, looking for a fight. Another way of saying, this man was expressing his constitutionally protected political views, and that's no longer allowed in Portland. Thanks to people like Kate Brown and Ted Wheeler. You could get murdered for doing it. This man was. Here's video of the killing. Note that someone calls out the victim's location just prior to his execution. In other words, it was a coordinated hit. Watch.